Nobody noticed the woman in the corner of the break room. She was drinking black coffee from paper cup, reading a worn paperback, her dark ponytail falling over one shoulder of her fresh, unwrinkled scrubs. She had been working at Mercy General Hospital in Portland, Oregon for exactly 11 weeks. She had said perhaps 100 words to her colleagues in that time. She clocked in at 6:55 p.m. every single night, clocked out at 7:02 a.m. every single morning, and in between those two timestamps, she was simply there. Reliable, quiet, invisible. Her name badge read, Mara Cole, RN, ER Department, Level 1 Trauma. The veteran nurses called her the Ghost. Not unkindly, exactly, but not warmly either. It was the kind of nickname that gets pinned on someone who refuses to offer the group anything to work with. No gossip, no complaints, no dramatic stories from the weekend. What nobody knew, what nobody had even thought to wonder about, was why a woman of 31 with eyes that tracked every exit in every room she entered and hands that never, ever trembled had chosen to become a nurse in the first place. That question, the one nobody thought to ask, would get answered on the worst night Mercy General had ever seen. In the morning after, two federal agents with badges clipped to their belts would sit down across from Hospital Director Patricia Hollis and ask her one very simple, very chilling question. Who exactly did you hire? The Pacific Northwest had been in the grip of a freak ice storm for 3 days running. The kind of black ice that doesn't look like anything until a vehicle is already sliding, and by then, physics has already made all the decisions. The overnight dispatch logs from Portland PD and Fire Station 7 would later describe the stretch of I-205 between exits 19 and 23 as a cascading mass casualty corridor, an antiseptic bureaucratic phrase for a stretch of frozen highway where, between 10:48 p.m. and 11:31 p.m. on a Thursday in February, 7 separate accidents had chained together like dominoes falling in slow motion. The first call came in at 10:53 p.m. Mara was restocking the trauma supply cart in Bay 3 when the red phone screamed. She heard charge nurse Donna Pacheco snatch it up at the station. Mara's hands kept moving, methodically checking the seal on each 4 bag, but her ears tilted toward the conversation the way a dog's ears tilt toward a sound in the walls. How many? Pause. ETA. Another pause. The quality of the silence between Donna's words told Mara everything before Donna even turned around. All right, listen up. Donna's voice hit the ER like a fire alarm, sharp and unambiguous, cutting through the low hum of the overnight lull. I-205 is a war zone. Multi-vehicle pileup, confirmed casualties incoming. We have 5 units rolling to us right now, and 2 more diverted from Emmanuel. All hands. The ER lurched into motion. Dr. Kevin Tran, the attending physician, appeared from behind a curtain, still holding a half-eaten granola bar. He dropped it into a trash bin without looking. Nurses began rolling carts, pulling supplies, calling out room assignments. The controlled chaos of a Level 1 trauma center shifting gears was something that took years to not find terrifying. Mara simply closed the supply cart, snapped off her gloves, and pulled on a fresh pair. The first ambulance arrived at 11:04 p.m. A 63-year-old woman named Ruth Calloway had been rear-ended at highway speed by a panel van whose driver had overcorrected on the ice. The impact had driven the steering column 6 inches toward her chest. She came unconscious, but in severe hemorrhagic shock, blood pressure barely readable, her sternum fractured in 3 places, and a tension pneumothorax already building in her right lung, air escaping the damaged tissue and collapsing the lung from the inside. Dr. Tran was already occupied. The second ambulance had arrived 30 seconds behind the first. A 22-year-old motorcyclist, Marcus Webb, with a traumatic brain injury and a femur snapped so severely the bone had broken the skin. Tran had him. Bay 1 was already screaming. Donna Pacheco looked at the incoming gurney, looked at the available attendings, and felt the specific cold terror of a charge nurse doing math that doesn't add up. Mara, she said it before she had consciously decided to. Bay 2. Tran will get to her as fast as he can. Mara was already moving toward Bay 2 before Donna finished the sentence. Here is what was observed by paramedic Jordan Reyes, who had ridden in with Ruth Calloway and was completing his handoff report at the bay entrance. The rookie nurse entered the bay, assessed the patient in what appeared to be roughly 4 seconds, and immediately called out tension pneumo, right side, before she had even touched the patient. She didn't wait for a physician's order. She snapped for a 14-gauge needle from the crash cart, identified the second intercostal space at the midclavicular line with her fingertip, and performed a needle decompression that would have been bold for a seasoned resident. The hiss of released pressure was audible across the bay. Ruth Calloway's oxygen saturation, which had been freefall, stabilized. Her eyes, which had been rolling upward in the particular unseeing way that precedes unconsciousness, refocused. She blinked. She grabbed the metal rail of the gurney with a shaking hand. "Am I dying?" Ruth rasped. "Not tonight," Mara said, already moving to the head of the bed to assess the cervical spine. "Not on my shift." Jordan Reyes would later tell the investigators that he had performed over 600 emergency transports in 9 years and had never, not once, seen a nurse perform a needle thoracostomy without a physician in the room. He was also clear on one other thing. Mara Cole had not hesitated for even a fraction of a second. There was no anxiety in her face, no consultation of a mental checklist, no glance toward the door, hoping a doctor would appear. She had simply acted with the flat, decisive certainty of someone who had done this before. Many times, under conditions considerably worse than a well-lit Portland trauma bay. He didn't know what to do with that observation. So he wrote it down in his report because it seemed like the kind of thing someone should know. Over the next 58 minutes, Mercy General's emergency department received 9 additional patients from the I-205 corridor. Of those, 7 would be classified as critical, meaning without immediate, correct intervention, they would die. Of those 7, Mara Cole saved all of them. The list, as it was later reconstructed: Ruth Calloway, 63, tension pneumothorax decompressed, chest tube placed, internal bleeding identified and escalated to surgery in time. Survived. Danny Okafor, 17, passenger in a family SUV. Arrived in cardiac arrest from blunt chest trauma, the heart's rhythm shattered by the steering wheel impact into a lethal pattern called commotio cordis. Mara recognized it instantly from the mechanism of injury. She called the shock sequence before the monitor had even fully loaded his waveform. The defibrillation worked on the second attempt. Danny Okafor would later be photographed at his high school graduation with his arm around his mother, the two of them crying in a parking lot. Susan Park, 41, massive internal abdominal hemorrhage from a seatbelt laceration to the mesentery. She arrived oriented but fading fast, her blood pressure in free fall, while she tried to tell the paramedics she was fine. Mara palpated her abdomen, felt the rigidity that means blood where blood should not be, and flagged her directly for emergency surgery over the objection of an overwhelmed resident who thought the patient was stable. The surgical team found 2 liters of blood in her peritoneum. The resident later told investigators, "She caught what I missed." She didn't argue about it. She just said, "Call it in now or she won't make it to morning," and walked away. Bobby Tran, 8, pediatric head trauma, seizure activity beginning as he was wheeled through the doors. Mara identified status epilepticus, called for lorazepam, dosing precisely calibrated for his weight without referencing a chart, and positioned him correctly to protect his airway during the convulsion. The seizure broke in 90 seconds. Bobby Tran went home 4 days later asking for chicken nuggets. Curtis Malone, 55, open femur fracture with uncontrolled arterial hemorrhage. The tourniquet applied in the field had slipped during transport. He was losing blood at a rate that left minutes, not hours. Mara identified the slippage by the pattern of blood loss, repositioned the tourniquet in 8 seconds. 8 seconds, 2 witnesses confirmed, and called for emergency vascular surgery simultaneously. Priya Nair, 29, 36 weeks pregnant. Placental abruption triggered by the crash impact, the baby in severe fetal distress. Mara heard the fetal heart tones on the portable monitor and immediately declared an obstetric emergency, calling for the OB team while simultaneously positioning Priya on her left side to relieve uterine pressure on the vena cava. The OB attending arrived to find everything already prepared, the call already made, the patient already stabilized enough to move. Baby girl Nair was delivered by emergency C-section 11 minutes later. Both survived. James Rutherford, 68. Massive stroke, right-sided, presenting atypically in the chaos of the trauma bay as confusion rather than the classic facial droop and slurred speech. He was going to be lost in the shuffle. Triaged as a confused elderly accident victim, worked up at a normal pace, while the clock that determines whether stroke treatment works ran down to zero. Mara caught it. She caught it because she noticed that his confusion was unilateral. He kept turning his head left, reaching left, as if his brain had simply deleted the entire right half of his world. She called a stroke alert at 11:44 p.m. The TPA was administered within the treatment window. James Rutherford would regain the full use of his right side within 72 hours. 7 patients, 58 minutes, every single one alive. At 12:02 a.m., Dr. Kevin Tran stood in the center of the ER, which had finally, breathlessly stabilized into something resembling controlled, and looked around at the aftermath. He looked at Mara, who was quietly completing her documentation at a corner terminal, her handwriting even and small. He walked over to her. He stood there for a moment, and she didn't look up. "Cole," he said. "Dr. Tran, that stroke patient. Room 6. How did you catch that?" Mara finished the line she was writing. Hemispecial neglect. Left gaze deviation. He wasn't confused. Half his brain was offline. Tran was quiet for a moment. "I train at Johns Hopkins. I did a fellowship in emergency neurology. I missed it." "You had 4 other criticals," Mara said. She still didn't look up. "Anyone would have. But you didn't miss it." She clicked her pen closed. She finally looked at him, and Kevin Tran would later describe the experience of being looked at by Mara Cole as something that felt distinctly unlike being looked at by anyone else he had ever met. As if her eyes were doing something beyond seeing. Cataloging. Calculating. As if behind them, machinery was always running. "I just did my job," she said. She turned back to the terminal and kept typing. Tran walked back to his station. He sat down. He pulled up the hospital's HR portal, and for the first time in 11 weeks, he typed her name into the search field. What he found, or rather, what he didn't find, made the hair on the back of his neck stand at rigid attention. Mara Cole's employment record at Mercy General was thin. Disturbingly, inexplicably thin. Most nurses arriving at a Level 1 trauma center bring a record that reads like a career autobiography. Clinical rotations, hospital affiliations, certifications, references, continuing education credits accumulated over years. Even a new graduate has a paper trail. Nursing school transcripts, board scores, preceptorship evaluations. Mara Cole's file had her nursing license, valid, active, issued by the Oregon State Board of Nursing 3 years prior. It had her certifications, ACLS, PALS, TNCC, all current. It had a single reference letter from a Dr. Henry Walsh at a small community hospital in rural Montana called Clearwater Valley Medical Center. It had nothing else. No undergraduate transcript. No nursing school records. No prior employment history beyond the single Montana reference. The application, submitted 11 weeks ago, had passed HR standard background check, clean criminal record, valid credentials. Nobody had looked harder than that, because there was no reason to look harder. Until now. Tran called Donna Pacheco over and showed her the screen without a word. Donna read it. She sat down slowly in the chair across from him, the way people sit down when something has shifted the architecture of a situation and they need a moment to find their footing. "Pull the reference," Donna said. Tran called the number on the letter. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. A recorded message. The number had been disconnected. He searched Clearwater Valley Medical Center. There was a website, sparse, the kind of website that looks freshly assembled. A small critical access hospital in a tiny Montana county. A medical director listed, Dr. Henry Walsh. A contact number. Tran called it. A real person answered. A woman named Paula, who worked the front desk. Was Dr. Walsh available? Tran asked. Paula told him that Dr. Walsh had retired 18 months ago. She asked if she could help. Had a nurse named Mara Cole worked there? Paula hesitated. She said she couldn't discuss personnel records. But the hesitation itself lasted exactly long enough for Tran to understand that the name had landed with some kind of recognition. He thanked Paula. He hung up. He sat quietly for 60 seconds. Then he called the hospital director's emergency line. Director Patricia Hollis arrived at 2:15 a.m., still in her coat from outside, her reading glasses perched on top of her head. She looked at the file. She looked at the reference letter. She looked at the disconnected phone number. She called the hospital's legal counsel, who called their government compliance officer, who, at 2:47 a.m., made a call that Tran and Donna would not know about until the next morning. The two agents arrived at 8:30 a.m. They were not the kind of FBI agents that movies have trained the public to expect. They were not particularly tall or particularly dramatic. Agent Sandra Forrest was 43, with a short, no-nonsense haircut and the permanent expression of someone who has heard every version of every story. Agent Dale Huang was younger, quieter, and took notes with a mechanical precision that made people feel like they were being cataloged. They sat across from Patricia Hollis in the hospital's fourth-floor conference room. The Portland rain had returned, sheeting the windows in gray. "Who exactly did you hire?" Forrest asked. Hollis pushed Mara's thin HR file across the table. "That's what we're hoping you can tell us." Forrest opened the file. She looked at the nursing license. She looked at the reference letter. Something moved briefly across her face, not quite recognition, but something adjacent to it. She looked at Huang. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. "Is she here right now?" Forrest asked. Her shift ended at 7. She should still be in the building. She usually completes her documentation before she leaves. Hollis paused. "She saved 7 lives last night. I want that said clearly and on the record before anything else happens." 7, Huang repeated, writing it down. 7 critical patients in under an hour. My attending physician called it the most extraordinary display of emergency medicine he's ever witnessed in 20 years of practice. Hollis leaned forward. "So whatever this is, I need you to understand that this woman belongs in this hospital. Whatever her paperwork says or doesn't say." Forrest looked at her steadily. "We're not here to remove her, Director. We're here because we have been looking for her for 2 years." The silence that followed stretched long enough to become a physical presence in the room. "Looking for her," Hollis repeated. "Should I understand that as a threat?" "No," Forrest said. And then, with the clipped precision of someone delivering a briefing, "Her real name is Major Mara Sinclair, United States Army Special Operations Medical Detachment, 75th Ranger Regiment. She was assigned to the 24th Special Tactics Squadron as an attached trauma specialist, the only woman to hold that qualification in the unit's history. She deployed 6 times to active combat theaters over 9 years. Her field casualty survival rate was 94%. The statistical average for her position in those conditions is 61%. Hollis sat very still. "She was listed as AWOL 25 months ago," Forrest continued, "which means the Army considers her a deserter. But we don't." She paused. "Because she didn't leave without a reason. She left because she found something she wasn't supposed to find, and the people she found it about have considerably more authority than she does." The rain hit the window in a long, shuddering wave. "What did she find?" Hollis asked. "That's above your clearance level," Huang said. "Not unkindly. Just a fact." "Then why are you telling me any of this?" Forrest folded her hands on the table. "Because we need your help to keep her safe. And because she needs to know that the situation has changed. The people she was running from, 3 of the 4 are in federal custody. The 4th died in an unrelated incident 8 months ago." She paused. "She's been hiding when she doesn't need to hide anymore. Mara was not in the building when they went looking for her. She had finished her documentation at 7:18 a.m. She had taken the stairwell up. She always took the stairs, never the elevator, and emerged onto the hospital roof through the emergency access door, which she had discovered 3 weeks after starting work was never properly latched from the inside. She did this sometimes in the hour before she drove home to the small apartment in the Boise Elliott neighborhood, where she lived with a second-hand couch, 300 paperback novels, and no photographs on the walls. The roof was 11 stories up, and you could see the Willamette River from the northeast corner, the water flat and silver in the morning light between the dark green of the hills. She found it useful, this particular view. It reminded her that the world was larger than whatever room she was currently surviving in. She was standing at that northeast corner, her hands wrapped around the last of the paper cup of coffee, when the door behind her opened. She turned before it was fully open. She had already cataloged the footsteps on the stairs. 2 people, the heavier one leading, measured professional pace, not hospital staff. The specific cadence of people trained to move through a building without appearing to move through it. She had heard it in Fallujah, in the Karengal Valley, in the narrow alleys of Mosul. She set down the coffee cup carefully on the edge of the parapet. 2 agents, badges already visible, held low and open, a deliberately non-threatening presentation that told her they had been briefed on her. She clocked the position of their concealed weapons from the set of their jackets. She noted the placement of the door relative to the stairwell access, the helicopter landing pad 20 yards to her left, the fire escape ladder on the south face of the building. She did all of this in roughly 4 seconds, and then returned her gaze to the agents' faces, because fleeing from 2 federal agents on a hospital rooftop in the rain was not in fact her plan. "Major Sinclair," said the woman. Mara looked at her for a long moment. "I haven't been a major for 2 years. That's actually what we came to talk to you about." They sat on the low concrete block of the rooftop HVAC housing, the 3 of them, in the rain that had softened now to a fine mist. Forrest talked. Mara listened. She was very good at listening, the kind of listening that leaves no expression on the face, no tells, that takes everything in and processes it somewhere deep and internal where nobody can see the machinery working. When Forrest finished, Mara was quiet for a long time. Below them, Portland was waking up. The early traffic on the Burnside Bridge. A tugboat moving down the river, steady and slow. The smell of rain on concrete. "Hargrove is in custody," Mara said finally. It wasn't a question. She was testing the sentence against something internal. Since October. Federal charges. The full scope of what they were moving through the medical supply chain. It's being prosecuted at the Department of Justice level. It's not going away. Forrest paused. "Your testimony would help." Mara looked at the river. Here is what Mara Sinclair had found 25 months ago in a forward-operating base medical supply depot in eastern Syria. $2 million worth of counterfeit pharmaceutical compounds, medications bearing authentic military contract markings but containing inactive or actively harmful substitutes, routed through a procurement chain that traced directly back to 3 senior officers and a defense contractor with federal contracts worth $900 million. The counterfeit medications had already reached deployed units. 2 soldiers had died from what was recorded as sepsis, but was in fact antibiotic failure. The medication they were given contained no active compound at all. When Mara had presented her evidence to her commanding officer, he had told her she was mistaken. When she had pushed it further up the chain, she had received a different kind of message, the kind that arrives not in words but in the sudden reassignment of her clearances, the disappearance of her reports from the system, the whispered advice from a colleague she trusted. "Stop. Leave. They have more reach than you do." So she had left. She had constructed Mara Cole out of valid nursing license obtained through entirely legitimate channels. Her medical training made the boards almost easy, a borrowed backstory, and the particular discipline of a woman who had spent years learning to exist in hostile environments without being found. She had not saved 7 lives the night before because she was trying to prove something. She had saved them because saving lives was the only thing she knew how to do without feeling like a fraud. "I need to think," Mara said. "I know," Forrest said. "Take the time you need." She reached into her coat pocket and set a card on the concrete beside her. "That's a direct line. Not to the switchboard. To me." Mara looked at the card. She didn't pick it up yet. "The people in this building," she said. "Dr. Tran, Donna, the director. Do they know what I was? They know your name. They know your rank. They know you were special operations." Forrest paused. Director Hollis's exact words were, "Whatever her paperwork says or doesn't say, this woman belongs in this hospital." Something shifted in Mara's face. It was small and fast, the way a light changes behind a window, but it was there. She picked up the card. At 9:45 a.m., Donna Pacheco was doing her shift-in paperwork when she saw Mara come through the stairwell door into the ER, still in her scrubs, her hair damp from the roof mist. Mara walked to the charting station, logged in, and began finishing a notation on one of the overnight files. Donna watched her for a moment from across the room. What Donna saw was exactly what she had always seen, a woman doing her job. The same steady posture, the same small, even movements, the same habit of checking every monitor in her peripheral field, even when she wasn't assigned to those patients. But there was something else now, something Donna couldn't quite name. A quality to the way Mara was sitting, not different exactly, but maybe more settled, less like someone braced for a ceiling to fall. Donna walked over. She poured herself a cup of the burnt overnight coffee and set one down beside Mara without being asked. "Rough morning," Donna said, which was, for Donna Pacheco, essentially a declaration of warmth and solidarity. "Getting better," Mara said. Donna sat on the corner of a desk. "Kevin told me what you did last night." "All of it." She paused. "He also showed me your file." Mara kept her eyes on the screen. "Thin file," Donna said. "Yes, but a hell of a nurse." Mara stopped typing. She turned and looked at Donna with those cataloging eyes, and Donna, who had been a charge nurse for 19 years and had seen every kind of person this city could produce come through her ER, looked straight back. "Whatever your story is," Donna said, "I don't need it today. I just need to know if you're coming back tomorrow night." The silence lasted long enough to feel intentional. "Yeah," Mara said. "I'm coming back." Donna nodded once, the definitive nod of a woman who has made a decision and considers it closed. She stood up, picked up her coffee, and walked back toward her station. She had taken 4 steps when Mara's voice came quietly from behind her. "Donna." Donna stopped, didn't turn. "Thank you." Donna raised her coffee cup slightly, a toast, or perhaps just an acknowledgement, and kept walking. 6 weeks later, a Thursday, the ER at Mercy General was running the smooth, controlled chaos of a well-staffed overnight shift. New residents on their second month, learning the rhythms. A few veterans holding the structure together with the practiced ease of people who have internalized the work so deeply it no longer costs them anything to perform it. At the central charting station, Dr. Kevin Tran was reviewing labs when he heard the automatic doors open and felt, in the particular way that the body registers some sounds before the brain does, that whatever was coming through those doors had changed the pressure in the room. 2 paramedics running. Between them, a gurney. On it, a construction worker, mid-40s, enormous, already losing the particular battle that human bodies lose when the heart stops receiving blood in sufficient quantity to maintain the machinery. Scaffolding collapse at a downtown job site. Multiple traumas. His name was Eddie Ramos, and he was going to die unless someone with exact knowledge of exactly what to do did exactly the right thing in the next 4 minutes. Mara was already at the bay entrance before the gurney had cleared the door. She had her gloves on. She had heard the doors open, registered the quality of the paramedics' footfalls, the specific percussion of people pushing hard and frightened, and was moving before anyone called her name. "Tension pneumo, left side," she said, reading the chest asymmetry from 6 feet away as they wheeled him past. "And he's bleeding somewhere in the abdomen. Look at the rigidity. He's guarding the whole left quadrant." She pushed through the bay doors. She went to work. Tran followed her in. He watched her for a moment from the threshold. This woman whose real name he now knew, whose actual history he had read in a heavily redacted briefing that the FBI had shared with hospital leadership, whose survival rate in conditions that he could barely imagine had been 94%. She didn't look like a legend. She looked like a nurse doing her job in a fluorescent-lit room in the middle of the night. That was, Tran had come to understand, precisely the point. The legend and the nurse were the same person. The extraordinary and the ordinary had been inhabiting the same body for so long that they were no longer separable. She had simply become a woman who showed up every night and refused to let people die. "Ready?" she asked, not looking up, adjusting the angle of a needle with the calm of someone threading a needle in the quiet of their own home. "Ready," Tran said. And together, in the way of all the best teams, built not from identical people, but from people who cover each other's gaps without being asked, they got to work. Eddie Ramos went home 11 days later. He brought a card signed by his whole crew, 22 names in different handwriting, to the ER nursing station. He asked to speak to the nurse who had been there when he came in. He said he'd heard a story from the paramedics and wanted to say thank you. Donna took the card. She told him a nurse he was looking for work nights. He said he'd come back. Donna said that would be fine. She put the card on Mara's locker, tucked under the door so it wouldn't fall. And the next evening, at 6:55 p.m., when the night shift began and the particular quality of silence that precedes the first emergency settled over Mercy General like a held breath, Mara Cole picked it up, read it, and set it carefully inside her locker on the small shelf above her extra pair of sneakers. She tied her hair back. She pulled on her gloves. She clocked in. She walked out into the ER and took her position. Somewhere in Washington, D.C., a federal case was building toward trial. Somewhere in a DOJ conference room, a prosecutor was reviewing the testimony of a former Army major whose field casualty survival rate was 94% and whose account of what she had found in a Syrian supply depot was going to dismantle a $900 million criminal enterprise and send 4 people to federal prison. But that was somewhere else. That was the other world. This world was here, 11 floors above the Willamette River, in a building full of people who needed someone to show up and refused to let them go. And Mara Sinclair, or Cole, depending on which name you were using, which world you were standing in, was very, very good at showing up. She always had been. She always would be. The graveyard shift at Mercy General is quieter than it used to be. Not empty. It's never empty. But there's a quality to the night hours now, a kind of steadiness, a sense that whatever comes through those automatic doors will be met with something equal to it. The nurses talk about it sometimes in the break room between calls. The way the room settles when she walks in. The way the chaos seems to organize itself around her the way iron filings organize around a magnet. They still call her the ghost. They mean it as a compliment now. If this story grabbed you and wouldn't let go, you already understand why. Some people carry extraordinary things in very quiet packages. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes don't announce themselves, and subscribe for more stories about the extraordinary lives hiding in plain sight.